In the name of God, who thinks man is beautiful and grants him happiness and kindness. So, as we've learned, the history of gas tells a story of the complete transformation of the economy for mankind, and that the economy is powered not only through the gas but through electrical supply that the gas also provides. And we're going to look at how a couple of countries, we're going to look at basically Israel and Egypt, and we're going to look at how the electrical infrastructure that supports the economy is completely supplied from the gas fields, and demonstrate the power of gas in the economy. That gas is the lifeblood of a modern economy, and how the countries of Israel and Egypt have adapted to that. Egypt is one of the oldest gas fields from basically in the 1900s. Iran and Saudi Arabia and Iraq are some of the other oldest gas fields in the Middle East. They're the first and the largest gas fields. And they have turned tides of economic power throughout the Middle East. And we're going to look at the need for the trade relations and the alliances between the countries of the Middle East, and how it is just simply connected with gas. So in Israel is this section here. So the Israeli gas is coming from offshore, and Israeli gas has pretty much always come from offshore, and they've only managed to be able to develop gas in Israel for the past maybe 20 years. So Israel has so they got the first gas offshore of Ashkelon, which is here near the north of Gaza. So they were in this area, they were getting gas, and they were pumping it onshore. Now, the gas infrastructure for Israel is a very new infrastructure in the world, and its technology, it's just remarkable. They are drilling at 5,000 feet under the water, and they are pumping them up through pipelines to a processing station that's still 10 kilometers offshore, where they'll process it, and then it will be like changed into different forms, like gas forms or different liquid forms, and pumped down more pipelines onto the shoreline. When they reach the shore, they'll be taken into refineries and further processed. and then they will be taken through other pipeline systems that go directly into the electrical grid. So all of the electrical grid, all of the electrical stations throughout Israel are connected with these pipelines. The gas must bring to the electrical station the gas needed to supply that electrical grid. And they have this incredible pipeline system that are from the ocean floor right into the power grid. They depleted their field near Ashkelon, and they moved further offshore to the Tamar in about 5 years later, in 2009. And then they made contracts with Jordan to start getting some of this gas as well, because the supply was so great that any excess after they had supplied their needs, their own internal needs and domestic needs in Israel, they could export it to other countries to help supply the electrical grids of other countries. And Egypt is a great partner of Jordan and supplies 90% of the electricity to Jordan. And Israel is now in a position to be able to take over some of that, some of the export duty. So they have other fields, the Leviathan fields, which are further offshore. And just in October of 2022, they brought online a new field called the Karish field, which is further north towards the offshore of Lebanon. And the Karish energy field is supposed to help supply some of the gas contract that they have with Europe. They're going to attempt to supply, Israel will attempt to supply gas to Europe, and they will do it out of this Karish gas field that they've discovered. So to show you, let's look a little more at Israel's gas fields. Here's the Leviathan. It's much further offshore. Here's Israel, and here's the Leviathan. It's much further offshore. There's the Tamar oil field, and here's the Karish, the new one. And as you can see, it's quite near to the offshore of the Lebanon. So this is the new oil field they want to develop. Now, these are the major fields of Israel. As you can see, the Israelis have quite a new development project for the gas, the pipelines, and it is so sophisticated and technologically advanced. So Egypt is an important factor and neighbor land. And between them in the Sinai Peninsula, you can see that they have their own gas offshore the area of Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. So here's Sinai Peninsula, and here is Gaza. Now, I did have a map of the Gaza fields, but there are just a massive number of, there's offshore gas. And they never tell you, they never publicize how much they actually have discovered. The Sinai Peninsula has offshore gas as well. And then this is the Great Nile River in Egypt, and they have a lot of gas offshore there as well. So Egypt, has, these are the oldest gas fields in Egypt. They're in the desert and the west. And Egypt started developing their gas in the turn of the century. They had their first, they started discovering it like 1880. And they got their first refinery 30 years later in 1911. And they were using these fields in this area to get the gas. They built the second refinery 10 years later in 1922. They had a heavy presence of the British in their drilling contracts. Basically, the British came over and told the Egyptians how to drill for gas, and by doing so established companies together, businesses together. In 1939, which is just 10 years later, they're already onto another gas field, the Ras Gharib. Within 5 years now, they're already onto a new gas field, Sutter oil field. And within a couple of years, they've got a crisis, 1948, where Israel's declaring itself a nation, and they are stopping the gas that goes in this very important pipeline. So there's a very old pipeline. It's called the Trans-Arab Pipeline, or the Arab gas pipeline, and it goes along the Suez, and it goes across the Sinai Peninsula, and importantly, the Arab gas pipeline goes from Egypt to Jordan, and it goes into Israel. By doing so, it crosses over across Israel as well. So it supplied Israel to gas. So the Arab gas pipeline has been designed to get gas from Egypt in the west over to Israel and Jordan in the east. Throughout the 50s and 60s, there's just a tremendous number of more oil fields opened, and in 1980s, more oil fields, and it just continues and continues. 1990s, 2000 to 2010 for Egypt was a time of a great surplus of gas and oil, to where Egypt now was exporting oil and making a great revenues internationally by selling oil to other countries. And one of the most effective ways of transporting gas is not ship by ship, but rather through a pipeline, a consistent flow. So the Egyptians began to develop offshore gas fields around 2020. So from the time of their just surplus of gas and export, and beginning to export and becoming a power, a world-class power in gas, that they are now moving offshore. And that's what we'll look at, those development blocks for Egypt's offshore. And British Petroleum is heavily involved, ExxonMobil, and then of course the Egyptian government's gas company. So this is the Mediterranean, and this is all offshore blocks. So the gas is formed from tremendous heat and pressure with the right chemical composition of a fluid, water, and other right composition of minerals, of rock. And the heat and the pressure and the mixing of this rocks with water is making these different grades of gas, liquid gas. And they are finding it. They can find it anywhere. They can find it throughout the entire Mediterranean Sea. They're absolutely finding it absolutely everywhere throughout the Mediterranean Sea. It's absolutely everywhere. There's no place that it's not. And they could find it everywhere. And the danger of, now they have been doing onshore drilling for gas and oil, but it breaks the ground. It causes the ground to disintegrate under and collapse and subside and become lower. And it does hell to the environment. It pollutes the water systems, and to make gas you need a lot of water. So they also need the water when they're producing it at the ocean floor. So they must have some kind of system to get the salt out of the water to make it good enough, because just for as much fluid gas is pumping back onshore is how much water they need to add to the mixture. And so due to the damage that it causes to land, they are smartly doing it offshore. And so those pipelines are critical infrastructure. They're all down the Nile. There's a mega project by British Petroleum. British Petroleum owns 80% of Egypt's electrical grid. So the British are in control of 80% of Egypt's electric, and the Egyptians pay the British for electric. And that is done by control of this offshore gas and the development of the pipeline that goes right along the river. Can even see it. Something I wanted to do. And so here we are in Egypt, and the Suez. This is the Suez Canal. And we're going to see that the banks are uninhabitable, and that there is obviously the water, the tides come and go. So down here there's different projects that become very clear. And the name of that pipeline, what they call it, they called it the West Nile Delta Pipeline Project, beginning in 2017. So officially, Egypt's natural gas is supposed to be 70% government owned and 30% owned by the British. But as you see, the feeder for the electrical grid is those revenues are going into British pockets. So um there's a track in this area with um pipes um that show big construction work with just tons and tons of pipes. It's part of the project to get to lay that pipe. These images were from the spring of this year, so these are very new images, which is great. But along this side, along the east side of the canal, is where I had seen the evidence that they're putting that. So another important factor, so between Egypt and Israel and this Suez Canal, the Suez Canal is responsible for a tremendous amount of trade to Europe, and it represents a great stake in the European economy. If the Suez Canal were to close down, it would stop tremendous supplies to Europe, and that would have a profound effect economically because of how what they do to produce, economically in Europe. They don't have gas fields. So for the country of Israel and the country of Egypt and these countries here near, especially Saudi Arabia and Iran, these are world powers of gas, and that the revenues from them are just billions upon billions upon billions and trillions, beyond any power, any other power of the country. These are tremendous powers, revenues that are being generated by just those industries. Jordan is getting their Jordan is getting 90% of their electrical grid fed by gas from Egypt. So the only alternative for Jordan to get, so Jordan depends on Israel for gas, and otherwise they would have to makes another way to get that supply. And the gas line, as we saw in the last map, it goes across Sinai and across the border of Israel and into Jordan. So Jordan depends on Egypt for gas, and that pipeline further extends the pipeline that goes through Jordan further extends into Syria. It goes directly to Damascus. It feeds into the heart of Syria, Homs, and from Homs it can go anywhere in Syria. And they expect to further connect it to Turkey, which naturally it must go through Aleppo because that's where the pipelines already are. And so it's practically already there. And the line that goes through Jordan, from Egypt through Jordan into Syria, also can supply Lebanon. But why would you buy gas from Egypt when you could buy it from your brother Syria? So the pipelines are existing. They already exist there.